Don't let the 28-14 scoreboard fool you. This was a beatdown of immaculate proportions. The Ravens just pushed the Steelers around all livelong day. This was embarrassing. This was terrible. As a Steeler fan, this was one of the worst performances I've ever seen in the playoffs. This was one of the worst performances ever. The Baltimore Ravens, I'm looking at the box score right now, and this is the troubling thing. Baltimore had rushed the ball 50 times in this game for 300 yards, for 299 yards. As a team, they rushed 299 yards. Pittsburgh, as a team, had 29 rushing yards. This was a 21-0 game at halftime. This was one of the worst performances I've ever seen from an offensive standpoint and from a defensive standpoint, just because nobody seemed to want to play. Nobody seemed like they wanted to be there against Baltimore. Where was TJ Watt? Where was Cam Hayward? This was the weakest Pittsburgh team I've ever seen. And this is the most hated rival in the entire NFL. Pittsburgh, Baltimore, notorious for how much they hate each other. Notorious matchup. This one didn't live up to the hype of years past. This wasn't even close. This was a bloodbath. This was just straight up. There was no turnovers in this game. This was strictly line up. Are you more dominant than the man across from you? And Baltimore just bullied Pittsburgh for 3 hours on that football field. Russell Wilson, he played fairly well, but that was give or take better in the second half. He went 20 of 29, 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Was sacked 4 times, though. Listen, as a Steeler fan, we have to start having an honest conversation about Mike Tomlin. We have to. It's the same thing year in and year out. It has been the same thing for over 10 years. We're going on 10 years without a playoff win in Pittsburgh. The last playoff win Pittsburgh has is against Alex Smith's Kansas City Chiefs, where Chris Boswell kicked 6 field goals to win. Ever since Pittsburgh lost to New England in the AFC Championship back in 2016, Pittsburgh has never been the same. Pittsburgh has not won a playoff game since then. How do you fix the Pittsburgh Steelers? Pittsburgh fans aren't going to like this. I think it's time to move off of Mike Tomlin. I'm not saying Mike Tomlin's a bad coach. As a matter of fact, he's a Hall of Fame head coach. I know that people hate using he's never had a losing record. Okay, I understand that. But our standards are Super Bowls. Our standards can't just be winning seasons anymore. Mike Tomlin does not know offense. Arthur Smith needs to get out of town. The defensive coordinator needs to get out of town. This entire coaching staff is so inept right now and so tone deaf to what Pittsburgh needs to move forward as a franchise. It's ridiculous. At this point, how do you fix the Pittsburgh Steelers? Here's what I would do. And as much as it kills me to say it because I love Mike Tomlin, I think it's just time to part ways. I'm not saying he's a bad coach, and I'm not saying it's entirely his fault. But it just comes a point in time where new scenery is needed. Just a new direction is needed. Tomlin went 5-2 his first couple years in the NFL in the playoffs. From, I believe it's 2007 to 2010, he was 5-2 in the playoffs and already a Super Bowl champion and already on the up and coming for head coaches. Then the next 10 years, he's 3-9 in the playoffs. Pittsburgh hasn't beaten an elite quarterback in the playoffs probably since Peyton Manning, or probably since Joe Flacco in the 2008 Super Bowl run. I can't think of a single MVP level quarterback that Pittsburgh has beaten in the playoffs. Alex Smith wasn't. Matt Moore for the Dolphins sure as hell wasn't. Like, there's just so many layers to Pittsburgh's issues. And I'm about to try and solve Pittsburgh's issues right now. When it comes to head coach, here's who you depart. Here's who you get rid of if you're Pittsburgh. At least this is my opinion, and it's not, I don't get any enjoyment out of saying it, but it's time to move off some pieces. Russell Wilson, it's time to let him walk. Najee Harris, it's time to let him walk. Trade Minkah Fitzpatrick. Trade Patrick Queen. Possibly trade George Pickens. Possibly him. It's time to move on from head coach Mike Tomlin. Fire the defensive coordinator. Fire offensive coordinator Arthur Smith. Get rid of him. If I'm Pittsburgh, I'm hiring Ben Johnson as head coach. I'm getting Byron Leftwich from Tampa Bay to be offensive coordinator, and I'm hiring Robert Saleh as defensive coordinator. I'm re-signing Justin Fields, and I'm trading up in the NFL draft to get a quarterback because I don't necessarily trust Justin Fields. I saw the Dallas game. I was there in person. It did not look good. It's not like Fields was playing terrible, but he definitely wasn't playing that great early on in the NFL season. I would keep Justin Fields one more year. I would trade up in the draft. I don't care what you got to get rid of. As much as it pains me, you might have to get rid of Minkah, and you might have to get rid of George Pickens, but you need something new in this offense. I would draft Cam Ward. Quarterback. I would draft a quarterback. Now, necessarily, I'm just being biased because I like Cam Ward because he went to Miami, but okay, let's say they keep their first-round pick exactly where it is. You can get a quarterback in the second round. Maybe a second-round quarterback, in my opinion, worthy. Jalen Milroe, even though I have issues with him. Or Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. I would draft one of those two. With our first-round pick, if available, I would draft Tez Johnson from Oregon. And then I would go and try and sign T. Higgins or try to trade for Garrett Wilson because I know he's unhappy in New York. That's what I would do if I'm the general manager and or owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm letting Tomlin walk. I'm letting the defensive coordinator walk. I'm letting the OC walk. I am letting Najee Harris and Russell Wilson walk. Maybe I might trade up in the NFL draft to get another quarterback like Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. I'd hire Ben Johnson at head coach, Byron Leftwich at offensive coordinator, Robert Saleh for defensive coordinator. And then from there on out, I think you can finally build around offense. We have the most expensive defense in the league. And what did that do for Pittsburgh in the playoffs? Nothing. Giving up 300 yards on the ground. Giving up over 400 yards of offense total to the Ravens. Pittsburgh was just smacked all over the field. This was a terrible performance and one that's an eye-opener. I'm not calling Mike Tomlin a bad head coach. Sometimes it's just time to move on. Sometimes it's just time to part ways. Mike Tomlin will be in the Hall of Fame. He's a Hall of Fame head coach. Again, his record speaks for itself, not his playoff record, but his record in general, his division title winnings, and the fact that he is a Super Bowl champion. Tomlin will be a Hall of Fame head coach, but it is time for Pittsburgh to part ways with Mike Tomlin and the quote-unquote Steeler way.